of Maryland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Barthold, for your testimony. I just want to briefly turn to the question of pass-through entities, because a lot of people have described these pass-through entities. They were all small businesses, and I'd just like to read from your testimony before the Senate Finance Committee, July 14, 2010, where you say, the staff of the Joint Committee on Taxation estimates that in 2011, just under 750,000 taxpayers with net positive business income, 3% of all taxpayers with net positive business income would have marginal rates that fell above 250,000. Is that correct?
Yeah. If you're reading from something I said,
I just want to make sure that fact remains true. And you have this very important caveat right here in your testimony. Then these figures for net positive business income do not imply that all the income is from entities that might be considered small in quotations. For example, in 2005, 12,862 S corporations and 6,658 partnerships had receipts of more than $50 million. Now, my point here isn't that these aren't good businesses. We should get over this conversation that all of these are small mom and pop entities, because they're just not. If you had a Washington law firm with 500 partners, and those partners each took a draw of $1 million, under this analysis, they would be included as 500 distinct business entities, correct? They would be included in your figure of 750,000.
How did you structure your law firm?
Huh? As a partnership.
It was the partnership. We did a number of counts, and actually, just to refer you to some more recent work that we've done, appendix tables in the prepared testimony that you have before you today, 10, 11, and 12 show you some ways you can distribute partnerships and S corps by size, either by the.
I was just going to ask you that, Mr. Barthold.
Well, that's why I was
to the quick right on it, just so members realize as we have this conversation. On page 54, if you look at your charts, you'll see that the top 2.2% of S corporations with gross receipts of more than $10 million received 61.7% of all the gross receipts of S corporations. Very small group. And if you look at the top 0.8% of partnerships with gross receipts of more than $10 million, they received 83.4% of all gross receipts. All gross receipts. 83.4 came from the top 0.8% of partnerships. So we should remember when we're talking about this issue that we are talking about, in many cases, individual partners at big law firms and big lobbyist firms, and considering each one of them some kind of a small business generator. I just don't think, I think people need to take that into account. Now, I want to ask you about the model.
Mr. Van Hahn, the only
Mr. Barthold, let me just, I'm sorry, I got 2 minutes. I want to ask you about the modeling here, because Dr. Elmendorf testified before our committee, and he said that if we were to keep in place the tax cuts that were implemented in 2001, 2003, rather than allow them to lapse in our current law, we would have much larger deficits in the out years, cumulatively 4.5% deficits. Now, as I understand your testimony, higher deficits, especially during a period of time of full employment, which we all hope to get back to, that those higher deficits can have a drag on the economy. Is that correct?
The higher deficit requires higher government financing, and so potentially long-run crowding out of private investment.
And that crowding out is especially true when you're in full employment, correct?
Well, it's not good
that's right. So now to get back to your scoring, though, when tax cuts are scored, whether they were 2001, 2003, because you do not take into account some of those macroeconomic effects, you also don't take into account the fact that those tax cuts could contribute to larger deficits in the out years and slow down the economy in terms of GDP, right?
Our macroeconomic analysis, when we provide it to the Ways and Means Committee, is, as you know, sir, accounts for what's happening with the deficit, how the package is funded, and so it does reflect potential crowding out, if that would.
But I guess it does not take the next step which would be analogous to some of the points that are being raised, which is that crowding out leads to lower GDP, which then leads to lower...
Our macroeconomic analysis will show that.
Right.
In some
but will it show the feedback then, the feedback loop, in terms of growth, in terms of your scoring? I'm talking about your scoring.
On scoring, again, to emphasize the point just made to Senator Toomey, we use our conventional, as does the Congressional Budget Office, we use our conventional models, which are scored against the Congressional Budget Office macroeconomic baseline, where we're not assuming that GNP, aggregate investment, aggregate employment, inflation rate, none of those factors.
I hear you. So you don't take that into account, the low growth rates.
Conventional.
And on CBO, when they score investments, when CBO looks at the investment side, investment in infrastructure and education, they don't take into account either the positive economic growth benefits of that in terms of receipts, do they?
In their conventional estimates, they do not account for the positive effects or the potential crowding out, depending on...
Right. It's analogous on the CBO in terms of investment to what you do on the tax side, correct?
Correct, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
That completes the first round of questioning for the first panel.